Welcome to the Nervous System Care and Healing Podcast, where we talk about how to take care of ourselves in mind, in body, in spirit, while we navigate systems that were designed to keep us dysregulated. I'm your host, Liz, a neurodivergent therapist of color, and I'm really glad that you're here. Hey everyone. So, if you have an ADHD brain, and if the common ADHD tips and tricks don't work for you, I want you to listen to this episode because I think you might find it really helpful, especially if you're feeling like it's time to try something different. This episode is going to really invite you to slow down and tend to your nervous system in maybe a different way than you're used to. Because the thing is, despite the common default advice out there, ADHDers need more than just planners or apps or the latest executive functioning hacks in order to move sustainably through this world. And though all of these tools can be so helpful and supportive, they address only one layer of the experience, the executive functioning piece. And the other layer is to also acknowledge the root causes of nervous system dysregulation, like the pressures of living by rules that don't actually work for our brains, social rules that were written for us, as well as the impacts of systems of oppression that try to tell us who we can be or how we get to live. So, what if we don't actually need more hacks or tips or tricks? What if we just need space to unlearn the rules that others decided for us and to build a kinder relationship with ourselves? So I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest today, Deema. We're going to dive all into this topic, so keep listening for an enlightening conversation that just might change the way that you understand and take care of your ADHD nervous system. Today, I am joined by Deema Al-Omar, and I will start by reading her bio. Deema Al-Omar is an associate clinical social worker working with clients based in California. She is a Muslim, Palestinian, neurodivergent, mid-size, middle child of immigrants, and cisgender woman. She typically works with Gen Z and millennial folks on issues related to identity and culture, ADHD, or trauma. She's also a certified Brainspotting practitioner. So, Deema, thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Great. So I'd like to start by asking, what drew you to this work and why do you do the work that you do as a therapist?
Yeah. Thinking about this question, I feel like I don't have a super polished answer for it. I was initially drawn to social work because I just knew I wanted to help people. I had wanted to work initially actually with folks involved in the foster care system, and just through school, they kind of push you toward clinical work in some ways, like individual one-to-one work. And so that's kind of where I've ended up for now. I don't know that individual one-to-one therapy will be my forever home, but I do deeply value the work. I really love working with clients, helping them navigate kind of the hardest times of their life, whether they're actively going through them or processing a hard moment from the past. And I just find it to be a sacred, intimate space. And I really enjoy being an anchor for people as they kind of process and heal from those things. So that's why I do the work now. That's why I've stayed doing it up until now. And we'll see what the future holds as far as my involvement in this work.
Yeah. Well, I love that openness and just being so open to wherever this path takes you and that the work can look a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know one of our main topics today is neurodivergence, the ADHD experience. So maybe we can start by hearing from you about what would you like us to know about the ADHD brain or nervous system and how it might be different from a non-ADHD brain or nervous system?
Yeah, I love that question because I feel like people, including folks with ADHD, don't fully understand our brain and why
Uh-huh,
it's different and what it actually needs from us.
uh-huh,
And so, on kind of like a neuroscience level, the ADHD brain is different from a neurotypical brain, quote unquote, because it lacks two really critical neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine. And we've heard a lot about dopamine. Dopamine is our like reward neurotransmitter. It's responsible for that, motivation, pleasure, that kind of thing. And norepinephrine is more for like alertness and focus and responding to our environment. And so with those two kind of either lacking or not being utilized properly in the brain, we struggle with what's called executive functions. And so
uh-huh,
you'll hear executive functioning a lot when we talk about ADHD. And those are your planning, your time management, your organization, impulsivity,
uh-huh,
transitioning between tasks, starting, completing tasks, all of
uh-huh,
those things, And so on a very fundamental level, our brain struggles with those things. And it's commonly described as like a lack of willpower or
uh-huh,
laziness or just
uh-huh,
not trying hard enough and not having discipline. But in reality, like our brains work differently. And we are kind of, a lot of times, if you're struggling with your ADHD, we're working against it. And so
uh-huh.
we want to work with it. That's kind of what the work with
Yes.
ADHD is around, is like working with your brain the way it works instead of trying to force it into a box that it doesn't fit in.
Mhm. Yeah. And thank you for such a clear description of what is happening neurobiologically in the
Yeah.
brain. And it is striking to me how, with the way society talks about or treats ADHDers, that it comes down to this character judgment of being resistant or lazy or unwilling or whatever. And what I'm really hearing from the more affirming point of views, like the ones you described, is really understanding that there is something different in the wiring and the neurochemistry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It comes
Yeah.
down a lot of times, it's like thought of as a character
Uh-huh.
flaw.
Yeah.
And that's just not what it is. Like that's just a
Yeah.
misinformed view of what's happening. And
Yeah.
there's almost always a different way to describe something other than like
Mhm.
lazy, So
Right, right.
yeah, like there's
Yes.
always something else going
Yeah.
on. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say around the ADHD brain. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of, not forcing our brains to fit into boxes that they just don't even, it doesn't work for them, but rather understanding how to work with the patterns or the rhythms of the ADHD brain. I'd love to hear if you have any experiences of supporting clients and really working with that, or if you want to share from your personal experiences, because something I've really loved about your social media work is how you share so openly from your lived experience, which makes it so relatable and approachable.
Yeah, I am a late diagnosed ADHDer. I didn't
Mhm.
know I had ADHD until after grad school, I think. I
Okay.
finished grad school, and right
Wow.
after I was sort of thinking about ADHD. I was seeing a lot of ADHD content online, and I
Mhm.
was just like, this is like exactly the conversation I have with myself in my
Mhm.
brain, like
Yeah.
actually exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And so I got diagnosed and everything, and it just like opened up this whole thing of like, oh my God, I have ADHD. I need to learn everything about ADHD. And so
Uh-huh.
like during my like research and like exploring around how to work with people with ADHD, I I kind of came to this realization that it's really deeper than the tips and the tricks and the hacks and stuff
Yes.
that we see a
Yeah.
lot online. And that's really where a lot of ADHD support is like gears to, is like, let's gamify this and let's race
Yeah.
against the clock and let's do all of
Mhm.
those things. And like those, I do believe some of those things have a place in like working with your brain. I'm not going to say those things aren't helpful. They've helped so many people. But I think on a deeper level, people with ADHD are struggling with a dysregulated nervous system
Mm.
and just like pendulating between I'm either overwhelmed and scattered and rushing and doing so many things all at once, or I'm like in paralysis and like stuck on the bed or the couch and I just can't even get up. That's deeper than executive function. Like that's your nervous system is dysregulated, and we need to find some kind of a middle ground here where you can do things sustainably instead of always in a state of like extreme, you know?
Yeah, and I just think about how that is so also disabling, right? To be in this pendulum swing that it feels like not having autonomy over one's experience. I'm also reminded of how, that is the mainstream narrative around ADHD of let's hack our way through this, tips and tricks. And while those can certainly be helpful, there's also more happening beneath the surface, and that like someone could have all the tips and tricks, but still be experiencing that dysregulation as a root issue. The way like our mental health system or our Western culture, we love to like cognition our way through things as if things could be a 1, 2, 3, like fix it. But you're saying that it's actually more complex than that, which makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people when I meet them and they come to me for ADHD support that I'm not going to teach you the tips and tricks are kind of baked in. They'll come, but like
Yeah.
there has to be like a fundamentally different way that we interact with the ADHD beyond tips and tricks for it to be long lasting and successful. So like we start with even just the tracking in the nervous system of like, what am I noticing? Like, what are my signs that I'm like going into those extreme states one way or the other? And how can I bring myself back? And only when I'm in that kind of middle ground, and you can call it whatever you want. I commonly describe it as like a flow zone. You can call it like your resiliency zone. You can call it your zone of well-being. You can call it whatever you want. But like when you're in that zone, then you can actually think clearly about what tip, trick, or hack or whatever is going to help me. Otherwise, we're just stuck in this like survival, like, let me download this app, or let me get this planner, or let me do this thing, or let me make this organizational system. And we just get stuck in this like, these things aren't working and I don't know why. And it's because they're not the answer. Like we have to slow down first before we figure out how to fix the problem, you know?
I really appreciate that like bottom up approach rather than just brute forcing it from like top down. Because of course, if a nervous system isn't resourced or in its resilience zone, then it can't absorb it's not available to implement any of the tips and tricks. Anything else that you want listeners to know about nervous system regulation or getting into that flow state for ADHD brains or ADHD questioning people?
I would say it's not easy. Like nobody's saying it's easy. You
Yeah.
know, it can be really hard to go from a state of like, especially if you're late diagnosed, ignoring your body's cues for so many years, ignoring what you know, like knowing that this thing is hard for you, but everyone else telling you that you should be able to do this thing, you know, or this should take only a short amount of time, you know, or this actually isn't a lot of things that you have to do today, you know, when it's like, we have to unlearn that, you know, like we have to uncover, explore where did we learn the rules that we're living our life by. And those rules actually aren't written anywhere. We've just internalized them and we can make new rules. And so there's just a lot of unlearning around like where we develop these beliefs around what we can and can't do and what is or isn't allowed or acceptable. And once we kind of uncover those, I find that it can be a lot easier to really embody the slowness, the using accommodations, reorganizing your refrigerator in a way that helps your brain instead of doing it in a way where your food always goes bad because you can't see it, you know, that kind of thing, I guess. That's what's coming to mind right now. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Actually, the having to reorganize the food in the fridge so that I don't forget that it exists has been such a thing for me lately. And then realizing like, okay, maybe I need to make the veggies more visible. I don't. So that example hits home for me. So speaking of just rules that we've internalized that may or may not actually work for our brains, I would love to bridge this conversation with like how, because we're all multifaceted human beings, how the ADHD or neurodivergent experience can really intersect with other identities or lived experiences or social locations.
Yeah, I think we have to talk about that,
Hmm.
right? Because,
Yeah.
like, this is part of kind of like going off what I just said around like these belief systems that we kind of develop and nervous system regulation as a whole, as a topic that we talk about. We really can't talk about that unless we talk about the systems that create the dysregulation,
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, like, we're talking about capitalism, we're talking
Hmm.
about racism, we're talking about sexism, ableism, all
Yeah.
the isms, like
Yeah.
family dynamics and life
Hmm.
experiences, gender identity, like all of
Yeah.
these things that tie into the way that we see the world or present ourselves or the rules that we get about what we can and can't do. It really creates more of a layered conversation
Hmm.
around regulating your nervous system,
Yeah.
And I think only when we explore those things, and that's where a
Mhm.
lot of the emotion comes in. And that's where it's
Yeah.
like more about we get deeper into these layers instead of just the hacking. Like the hacking's
Mhm.
not going to work because there's a deeper issue going on. I mean, it might work in the moment. It's like a
Mhm.
very short-term solution. But
Mhm.
if we're actually trying to like live a more embodied, true, aligned lifestyle, we have to unpack like where these beliefs are coming from, where we learn them. How can we kind of move into a higher version of ourself that
Yeah.
feels more true, not just
Yeah.
with ADHD, but with maybe all the other things that are also impacting that cycle of
Yeah.
dysregulation?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, this is making me think about how, for me growing up in a Chinese American immigrant
Mm,
household, that the idea of laziness or not wanting to work or like pull yourself up and just do it, power through, like that comes with certain connotations and cultural nuances that might look different in a household from a different culture. So, just to your point, that it's always relevant to the conversation that nothing happens in a vacuum.
absolutely. Yeah, and I'm Arab American, I'm Muslim, like growing up I like I've always struggled with this particular part of like being Muslim, which is praying daily,
Mhm.
and you have to pray 5 times a day. And I had always struggled with that for a long time around like getting up to pray because of like the paralysis of ADHD
Yeah.
sometimes that comes up. And there can be a lot of like shame that comes with that, where it's like, oh my God, you missed prayer. And it's like, I know, but like my brain just wouldn't get up. Like I just couldn't. And when you don't feel super connected to prayer sometimes or like I know how to like recite what we recite in prayer, but I don't
Mhm.
always understand everything that I'm saying because it's in Arabic that you have to pray. And so there's not as much of a connection. So I've reached a place in my life where I am praying regularly, but
Mhm.
it's also like I get distracted a lot. I
Mhm.
forget which part of the prayer I'm on and did I
Mhm.
do this thing or that thing, and my brain is going a lot, and there used to be a lot of shame tied to that
Mhm.
about like how I just can't seem to stay focused while I'm praying. And like, kind of unpacking, like, okay, it was ADHD, like, my whole life, like,
Mm.
that's why I couldn't do this, that's why this felt
Yeah.
so difficult for me, and
Yeah.
just kind of removing that layer of shame of, like, okay, you know what, I have this brain. I'm a religious
Yeah.
person, so I know God gave me this brain. He
Mhm.
knows what's going on in my brain and in my
Yeah.
heart, and I'm just going to do my best every day that I can? And
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of specific experiences depending on like what background we share
Yeah.
that are just so nuanced that like it's just such a personal experience to have
Yes.
ADHD, I think. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'll say on that.
Yeah. That is such an important example of how that can show up and weave into the everyday life. One thing I remind myself every time, just like working with neurodivergent folks, being neurodivergent myself, is just that like for every person out there, that is one flavor of the neurodivergence, or
Yeah.
right. And we haven't even talked about how ADHD might intersect with autism or
Yeah.
giftedness. So there's all that layer as well.
Mhm.
I would love to bring in another component of this conversation, which is one of the modalities that we're both trained in, that we both really like, which is brain spotting. I know I've noticed brain spotting can work really well for neurodivergent brains, but maybe let's back up and kind of have you share how brain spotting works, maybe how you've been experiencing or working with this modality.
So I love Brainspotting.
Mhm,
Brainspotting is a somatic neuroexperiential
mhm.
model of therapy, and it was developed by Dr. David Grand, and it operates on this basic premise of where you look affects how you feel. And so we use relevant eye positions that your practitioner or whoever you're working with will help you find using a pointer or using your natural gaze, and we use those sort of eye positions as sort of like an access point or a window into the deeper layers of your brain where the trauma or the activation or the imbalance is stored. So that's like a very base level understanding of what
Yeah.
brain spotting is and how it works. It's a commonly used for trauma as a trauma therapy, but
Mhm.
what I also love about it is that it can really be used for anything that has some
Yeah.
type of emotional charge or
Yeah.
activation. It can be used for like depression, anxiety. It can be
Mhm.
used for trauma. It can be used for performance enhancement or
Mhm.
creativity or
Yeah.
and expanding into a state of being that you'd like
Yeah.
to achieve.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what it is and how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
for that breakdown. And I'm just thinking about some of the sessions I've had in brain spotting, both as a client and as a therapist. And people are often so surprised by how precise brain spotting can feel. It has this surgical like precision where one eye position can really lock them into like a certain type of processing or like memories coming up, somatic experience. Everyone processes differently, of course. And then just a slight shift in that eye position can really shift that experience or open up another window for processing. So I find it so cool how it's not really about using like fancy equipment or like this 12-step process. It's just like notice where you're looking and how does that make you feel?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like everything you just said. I love all of those parts of it too.
I'm curious if you've noticed anything about how brain spotting might work with ADHD brains, and of course everyone's different, but what you've seen in some of your brain spotting sessions.
I've seen like such a range of reactions or responses to brain spotting. And it's interesting because most, if not all of my clients have ADHD. So if I did
Mhm.
brain spotting with them,
Yeah.
they also have ADHD. So we're seeing how it interacts with their like
Yeah.
neurodivergent system brain
Yeah.
also. What I really love about it is that like it's so flexible that like
Yeah.
if you found that like talk therapy or like we call it like the neocortex or the
Mhm.
thinking brain, if like that
Yeah.
type of therapy had its limit for you, it didn't work or you felt like you kind of plateaued or whatever, and
Mhm.
you need something a little bit more like deeper, embodied, somatic, something where you maybe have trouble communicating the words and you just know how you feel. Like that's
Mhm.
where I really feel like it shines is with
Yeah.
folks that need something where they don't necessarily have to talk.
Yes.
Like we're
Yeah.
taught a lot in like therapy school that you
Mhm.
have to talk about your trauma to heal
Yeah.
from it, and
Mhm.
brain spotting really directly challenges that because
Mhm.
we're like bypassing the area of your brain where
Yeah.
talking is. And we're like going
Yes.
deep into like where the
Yeah.
trauma is, where the emotion is stored, where those little fragments are. And you can just feel it in your body. You can just notice and be open. And it also has the flexibility for folks that might need some of that verbal processing and maybe do need
Yes.
to talk a little bit more, or
Mhm.
maybe do need a little bit more check-ins. So I have found the flexibility one of the greatest tools of being able to just apply it in the way the client system needs and knowing that like neither of us are doing anything wrong by doing that. Like
Yes.
the whole premise of Brainspotting is to be attuned and follow your client's nervous system. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I guess that's kind of what comes to mind when I think about working about with Brainspotting with folks with ADHD.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And there's this meta level of it too, where because it's a process where you can't do it wrong, you can't brain spot wrong, you're just having your experience and noticing it.
Mhm.
I imagine that is also really healing and helpful for people who may have felt like they've been doing their whole life wrong because they were trying to navigate a system that wasn't built for them. But to actually be in a space where it's like, no, seriously, just be with your experience. There's no wrong here is
Yeah,
also very liberating and probably a new experience for a lot of us.
absolutely. I love it when clients are like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. And I'm like,
Mhm.
there's no way to do it right or
Yeah.
wrong. You just
Mhm.
notice what's coming up. Even if
Yeah.
nothing is coming up, just
Yeah.
notice that. And like, what is that like?
Exactly.
Like there is no way
Yeah.
to engage with your own nervous system incorrectly. So
Mhm.
you're doing it
Yeah.
right.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I sometimes experience brain spotting as a tour of your own nervous system because
Mhm.
there's no agenda that we're trying to follow of, well, now the distress needs to go down to zero, or now they need to be healed and come out with everything wrapped up in a nice bow. It's just if all they did was notice dysregulation and notice how the sensations in their body actually respond to being noticed,
Mhm.
then that is building that interoceptive awareness and nervous system uh, awareness and acceptance and autonomy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And something else that maybe doesn't get talked about as much is how with brain spotting, while it can be so effective, right? That surgical precision of working through and releasing trauma held somatically in the nervous system. It can also just help us be with things, as you said. And I'm thinking about the collective experiences of trauma, collective stress or grief, as well as the ongoing sociopolitical climate, where that's something it's not like, oh, now the distress is going to go down, we fixed it. It's like this is an ongoing thing we're all navigating. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if you have anything you want to share with us about how brain spotting can support us in just like navigating the present day reality.
Yeah. I think it's really about brain spotting tapping into that like natural biological like ability for our body to transfer between like imbalance into balance.
Yeah.
So like we're
Yeah.
moving into homeostasis or balance often. Like your body naturally wants to move into that.
Yes.
With brain spotting, even if you are like constantly moving out of that window
Mhm.
because of the current sociopolitical climate or stress or
Yeah.
trauma or whatever you're going through,
Yeah.
you're through brain spotting, your body is going to naturally lead you to where that imbalance is in this moment in time and
Mm.
help you bring that down.
Mm.
So we're accessing the imbalance like naturally. We're trusting in your body's natural ability to heal
Yeah.
itself, weed out the imbalance, and bring it back down. And
Mhm.
so even in this state when we are always being activated, it can still help us reach
Yeah.
that centered, balanced state on a
Mm.
very like physiological level. And the other thing I think is really amazing about it is because we're kind of going into the subcortex or like the deep brain where there's not really any time, we can like time doesn't exist there.
Mhm.
It's just all of the trauma or emotions are there.
Yeah.
We can even access layers and layers of trauma that are like generational or
Yeah.
ancestral and trauma that doesn't feel like it's yours, like your
Mhm.
whole lineage is like experiences,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
struggles and everything that could have been passed down to you. We can
Yeah.
access that and we can bring that out and it can be
Yeah.
healed or addressed and tended to using
Yeah.
brain spotting. So that's kind of what comes to me when we talk about like the
Yeah.
sociopolitical climate and how brain
Yeah.
spotting can help.
Yeah. And I have this just image of like reaching deeper and deeper into the roots or beyond this door there's another and there's another and
Yeah.
that there's energy and somatic information our bodies might hold that doesn't belong to us but came from before us in the lineage or the ancestral experiences. Yeah, and
Yeah.
how, wow, I mean, how powerful to be able to have a way to access that through the eyes and like the window of the soul.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
incredible. And like
Yeah.
people will talk about being able to clear something out that they thought they processed,
Yeah.
they thought was done. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, it wasn't. It was still there. There was still some piece of it in there. And brain
Yeah.
spotting has that ability to like reach deep into the layers
Yeah.
of your brain to kind of clear out wherever
Yeah.
that imbalance is, that seems to still be
Yeah.
there. We can
Mhm.
we can access that, so I think
Yeah.
it's a really amazing, incredible thing to witness too with people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It does feel so sacred being in a brain spotting space, either as a practitioner or the one receiving it.
Yeah.
And so, anything else that you want people to know about ADHD, neurodivergence, how that intersects with all of our lived experiences? Any other gems you want to share with us?
Any other gems? I feel like at the core of all of this is just having a mindset of curiosity about
Hmm.
yourself, whether
Yeah.
it's ADHD or brain spotting.
Hmm.
I always tell my clients that like every experience or every week goes by that you feel like you still struggled with ADHD, for example, is information.
Hmm.
Like we know that, okay, this worked and this didn't. And it's
Hmm.
just like about being curious. With
Yeah.
brain spotting, curious about your sensations, being mindful
Yeah.
and open and non judgmental around what you're noticing and just notice and
Yeah.
then move with that. And
Yeah.
so we want to move out of criticism and into curiosity so that we
Yeah.
can find what works for us.
So as we're wrapping up here, I love to ask our guests if there's one way that you like to take care of your nervous system that you'd like to share, or multiple ways.
I think the biggest way that I care for my nervous system now is by moving slower. Like,
Mm.
it's just like as simple as that. Like, anytime
Yeah.
I notice my body moving quickly, like maybe I think I'm going to be late to something, or maybe I'm cooking really quickly and taking out too many things all at once and getting scattered, or
Mhm.
any demonstration of like a fast pace going on in my life, I become aware of it. And then I just like pause and remind myself that like nothing is an emergency. Like there is no
Yeah.
bear chasing me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna run to the bathroom. I'm gonna walk to the bathroom, Like
Yeah.
my client's waiting for me, but I'm not gonna run because it's just
Yeah.
the bathroom and everything's gonna be okay, in a couple of minutes. So just embodying slowness has been really helpful for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
and I can so feel that in your
Yeah.
pacing and just letting things be slow and how that actually creates more time and space in a way rather than
Yeah.
rushing. All right. And could you let our listeners know if they're interested in connecting with you or working with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can connect with me. Probably the quickest way to connect with me is going to be through my social media at Hey It's Deema on Instagram. It's the only social media I have, so that's the only
Mhm.
one.
Any other accounts are fake.
Yeah.
If that,
If
yeah.
anyone else is pretending
Right.
to be me,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
that's
This
not
is all on the
me.
record, only on
Yeah.
Instagram. Yep. Hmm.
So yeah, at Hey It's Deema on there. I've actually shifted it to at Hey It's Deema instead of Therapy with Deema because I just feel like I'm more than just like a therapist, and I'd like the kind of
Absolutely.
permission from my handle to share more than just like therapy or mental health content. So it's a bit varied on there, and that's just because I'm a very varied person. So yeah,
We
you
love
can
that.
connect with me on there. There's a link in there to request a 15-minute consultation if you'd like to work individually with me. And there's some other links on there for like other offerings, like groups that might be happening in the future, or to purchase my executive functioning guide that is available for folks that want more information about the model that I use with clients.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And I know I've seen, speaking of beyond one-on-one therapy, just some of your group offerings have sounded so resourcing and helpful. And anything you want to share about the executive functioning guide, anything you want people to know about it and who would be a good resource for?
Sure. Yeah. So it is a pretty comprehensive guide. The guide plus the bonus pages are like 70 plus pages, and it's all made by me. And it's just really a accumulation of like all the stuff that I do with clients. It kind of really walks you through like understanding your nervous system, exploring your belief systems, thought regulation, external regulation, supportive accountability is one of the things in there too. Like, there's a lot jam-packed in there. The only thing you're really missing is me to walk you through it. So, but I think I did a pretty good job of like, making it really easy to understand.
Great.
So if you're wanting, if like maybe therapy is out of the budget right now, or executive functioning coaching is out of the budget, that might be a really great place to start to kind of get some of those foundational pieces going.
Beautiful. That's so
Mhm.
helpful to have that available for folks as one of the options for support. And I know that resources created by people with lived experience tend to
Yeah.
be most helpful for people with the lived experience. So that is
Yes.
wonderful to know.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Deema. And we'll have all of the links and how to get in touch with her in our show notes. And just want to thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your wisdom and perspectives on ADHD that don't get centered as much, but that we absolutely need to be talking about more.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nervous System Care and Healing podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. And if you ever have a few minutes to leave a rating and review, it would mean so much to me, and it helps other people to find the podcast and spread the care. Please remember that this podcast is not a replacement for therapy, coaching, or professional mental health services. The information shared here is generalized, it may not reflect every individual nuance, and it should not be interpreted as personalized mental health advice. So please do seek out additional support if you need it. Take care and be well. This is Liz at Nervous System Care and Healing.